Krista, it is such an honor to welcome you to the Soul Collective podcast. Thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited looking at your beautiful face. We're just gonna rock it. She's moving, she's pregnant. It's gonna be such a juicy one, especially when we're in periods of transition like you are and like I am. So it's always fun to connect in those moments.
Yeah, I've been super excited for this conversation. As an interviewer, I just really admire you. You're such a phenomenal interviewer, and you bring so much grace and honesty and humor to the conversations that you have. And it's also been super fun just to watch the evolution of your journey. And so, yeah, I'm so excited just to dive in. And I want to start by asking you, like, how it all got started. I knew you grew up in Ohio, but I'd love to know how Almost 30 got started and how the evolution really unfolded.
Yeah, of course. So even on the interviewer piece, being someone that now has a podcast where we interview people, I've been interviewing people my whole life. I grew up in a household where there wasn't a lot of emotional connection. People weren't really in conversation, people weren't really talking. There wasn't a lot going on. So, me as a child, I learned that through interviewing people, asking them questions, like diving deep, like just kind of communicating in that way that I could get connection and that I could communicate with people. So, I was always, someone that was super curious and kind of going a little bit further with my parents to get them to connect with me. And later in life, when I felt really lost on my path, I felt like I really wanted to find my purpose in my 20s after being in the corporate world for a long time and jobs that weren't fulfilling, doing roles that I didn't love. I was like, I want to make meaning of my life. I want to do something that is meaningful. I want to be in service. I want to be myself. And in that low moment, I asked my best friend, Lindsay, who's my podcast co host, if she would start a podcast with me and we could just talk about this feeling of wanting to find purpose, this feeling of feeling lost, this feeling of wanting to become our most authentic selves in our lives. And we started our podcast on our closet floors in 2016. And we've grown it to a brand and a business that we really, really love. But it really started out of this like deep desire for meaning in life and a deep desire to be who we truly were. And it's become something that has been, our full-time jobs and something that we deeply love and I'm really, really grateful for and has been just such a gift.
Yeah, I'd love to explore kind of the journey from a friendship perspective, from a business perspective. There's so much there, but I am really curious. I know you've talked a lot about finding your purpose and, in that period of life when you're in your, mid to late 20s, there's so much around like, what do I want to do with my life? Like, how do I really want to express my gifts? Can you share a little bit about what that was like and also what that feeling was like when you like were in search of your purpose?
Mhm. Yeah. For me, the search for purpose felt incredibly painful. It felt like this really painful experience of feeling like I didn't have any value to the world, that I felt lost. I felt confused. I felt this like burning desire of being a human on earth, but not really knowing why I was here or what I was doing. So it felt really hard. I would say that for most people, the path and conversation around purpose is one that doesn't feel good. It feels like kind of like people are always searching for something. And so the paradox of purpose is that we're always on purpose. We're always here for a purpose. No matter how lost we are, everything we do is like layered in purpose. Like God created us for a reason, God created us for a purpose. Sometimes we know that purpose, sometimes we don't. And then the other side is that it's really good and meaningful in life when you feel like you have something that gives you purpose. You stepping into motherhood or being a mother is a part of your purpose here on earth that you're about to experience, which is so beautiful. So for me, I always just wanted to have an experience of being myself and being in service at the same time. But what I felt like I was trying to do was find my purpose. And I found my purpose without trying. It was me being my authentic self in conversation, interviewing, being curious, being who I was with my best friend. And then it turned out to be something that was in service to people. So I always say when people are looking to find their purpose that it doesn't always have to be something that is really grand or big or something that someone else is doing. For us, we started the podcast in 2016, and there definitely were a lot of podcasts out there, but there wasn't a lot of female shows with two best friends that were like ours. We were kind of the beginning. And so it was something that I didn't think would be my purpose. I didn't think could be my purpose. And then it kind of evolved into that. So allow yourself to follow your intuition, to let your heart be your guide, let yourself explore a lot of different things, and let your purpose really reveal itself by you following what feels good to you. I think that's the biggest thing that people can do on their path is follow what feels good. And then the purpose will either be revealed or embodied through that process.
Hmm, that's such great advice. And, I know you've really discovered your voice and been able to cultivate that over time. And that is such a powerful gift to be able to express and feel comfortable in. And I'd love to hear more about your journey, and especially like in such the public eye of finding your voice. Like, wow, what has that journey been like?
Oh my gosh. Well, you're using your voice right now. So we always have to remember that you're doing it too. So my journey with my voice, I never thought that my voice would be the thing, in this path of life. I think that we think about outward ways of being and things that we can do for our careers and our jobs that really fit. But I never thought that my voice would be the thing that makes me money, the thing that makes an impact, the thing that like is going to be the thing that cultivates a response from people and makes me feel like myself. But I'll never forget when I was 8 years old, I had this experience where I was with someone's mother, and she said, you have a really beautiful voice. And I thought to myself, that's such a weird thing to say. I never had the experience of someone recognizing my voice, but I remembered it. And then becoming someone that started the podcast just for the genuine curiosity of expressing myself, and now really realizing that my journey's always been about the voice, because there have been points in time in my life where I've lost my voice. I grew up in a household again where there wasn't a lot of conversation, there wasn't a lot of communication. I felt like I wasn't really heard or listened to or respected or valued, and so I wanted to have a voice, but I didn't. I also got myself in romantic relationships where I lost my voice. I lost my identity. I prioritized their needs over mine. I didn't speak up. I, just kind of lost myself. And over time in my life, I've realized that when I've lost my voice, I've lost myself. And so now it's really my goal to cultivate my voice and my truth as much as I can. And that means speaking my truth in hard moments. That means saying the most loving thing. That means saying the most true thing. And that means really, really thinking about how my words create my reality and my words create my experience. And so the voice journey for me, and then hopefully for others, can be something that's incredibly soulful, that's incredibly deep, that's incredibly transformative for our lives to create a reality again that we really love and really enable us to be the most me or the most you possible.
Mm. It's so powerful. And I feel like there's so much that listeners, myself included, can relate to about that journey of self expression. And I'm so curious to ask you, was it the intention behind really bringing your voice forward and being able to speak your truth, or were there practices, or what like really helped you to cultivate that over time?
Mm, that's a beautiful question. So, what has helped me cultivate my voice over time? I think I will say, for the most part, or the most important part, has been practicing with someone I trust. And that person is Lindsay. So, Lindsay is the person that has really helped me cultivate my voice with, not only through our podcast and us speaking on a show every week, but also in hard moments. Because what I realized is that I could be someone that speaks publicly, says all the things on a podcast, but then in intimate moments and in intimate relationships, that's when it really gets hard. Telling someone you love them, telling someone that you're upset with them, telling someone that you have a boundary, telling someone that you're disappointed, telling someone that you need love, being someone that can communicate the vulnerabilities and the softness and the truths has been something that I've really learned to do with Lindsay. So using her as a foundation and playground for development of my voice has been really, really impactful. And then also, I'd say therapy, having my therapist be someone that allows me to say whatever I want, to express whatever's coming up, to be messy, to be wild, to say things that, aren't always perfect, that aren't always, um, you know, good, has been really helpful. And I made that commitment at the beginning of my therapy journey. And I said, I want to say everything. Like, I want to say every single thing that comes to mind, even if it's wrong, even if it's not true, even if it's mean, even if it's bad, because I think giving a voice to that can often diffuse it and then often liberates us in a lot of different ways. And so, for anyone that wants to lean into their voice or cultivate their voice, not only does it take, the conversations in hard times or therapy, but it also takes practice. And what I'll say is that once you draw intentional awareness to your voice, to the tone, to the pace, to the cadence, to the words that you're using, it can be something that you can develop every single day because we're always in conversation, we're always in communication. So I spend a lot of time listening to speakers that I love. Listening to Mel Robbins, how she paces herself, how she tells stories at certain times, how she pauses, listening to amazing speakers on TED Talks and just watching and noticing what they do and seeing what you can learn from them. And then, as a last thing, I think noticing how your voice changes. We all know that voice that we have when we answer the phone, when our mom calls, when we answer the phone, when someone we love calls, when a telemarketer calls, we're like, hello, our voice goes up, it gets a little more in our head. We know how our voice sounds when we have a boundary that's crossed. We get deeper, we get more guttural, we get more in the body. And so just noticing how the voice is also this like barometer for how we feel and for our energy, and just really playing with that and making it exploratory.
I love that. And what you're saying really brings up this feeling of embodiment, of being in your body when you're speaking and expressing, and how powerful a practice that is. And that really relates to something that I wanted to ask you about, which, you've shared so publicly and openly about, which is, such a gift, I feel, to the world, is to share about your journey with body image. I'm curious to ask you how that's correlated to really deepening into your own self-expression.
I love that question. And I'm sure, being a mother almost, that's a whole journey in itself with the body changing in this way where you're like, I'm in love with it, I'm scared of it. It's like all the things. So our body journey for women is just so layered and so complex. And for me, it's been the most painful relationship I may have had in my life. I remember for so long just thinking, I'm never going to be rid of this voice that's constantly criticizing and judging and shaming and blaming and hating my weight, hating my body, hating the way that I looked. I was never enough. I never looked good enough. I never weighed less enough. I never was this enough shape or whatever it was. And I thought that I would die with that, constant conversation and beratement that I had on myself. And it wasn't until I really started in my personal work journey and I started healing the mother wound. I started doing a lot of therapy work. I started really taking it seriously that I was able to become free and liberated from that conversation. And I think it was only the past probably 2 years where I now feel completely at peace with my body and completely at peace with food and the way that I look. And I don't take that for granted because so many women struggle every single day, all of the time with that. We are so programmed. We are so painfully um, poked at and prodded by the media, by social media, by TV, by our parents, by men, by women to do and look a certain way. So to say that has been incredibly painful for me. And then embodiment as it relates to the voice. I think the voice has been huge for me as it relates to the body because I was someone that I think because I wasn't using my voice in a lot of different ways, I would use food to stuff my voice down. I would actually overeat, I would overconsume, I would numb out because there was a lot of things I wanted to say, but I wasn't expressing. So my numbing mechanism, my coping mechanism to keep myself small, to shut myself down, to not express was actually food. So I had a relationship with food where it was numbing and where it was almost like a drug for me so that I wouldn't speak. And when I've become more able to speak my truth, more able to say how I feel, more able to be in my body and to express, I haven't needed food as much. I haven't been as obsessed with food. I haven't needed to eat to stuff anything down because I'm actually allowing my feelings and my thoughts to be expressed through the voice.
Such a beautiful journey. And I'd love to just know about, how that has felt from you, how, like, what the transformation has felt like to be inside of that and to just feel totally liberated in your skin and in your body.
Yeah, I think it's been something that I almost get scared because I feel so good that I'm almost like there's the part of you that's like the other shoe's going to drop. So what if it changes? I think what can happen is we can get so attached to a certain state of being when we feel good. We're like, oh my God, I love it. We're like, oh my God. And then I'm like, I can't ever change. I can't ever not have this be this way. I can't ever not feel good. But to be someone that has hated how I looked and my weight and my body for so long and have it be such a dominant thought and now feel liberated and free from it has been life changing. I feel like I have this new outlook on my body and my way of being that I never thought I'd have, where I don't think about how I look, I don't think about my weight, and I exist in a way where I'm more focused on how I can be of service, of how I can feel good, of how I can love, of how I can be more of who I am from a personality perspective than what I look like. So it's just completely life changing. And my dream would be for everyone to have a taste of that, if not have that be their experience.
Mm. Yeah, so powerful. And it's true. I mean, it changes from season to season too, like how we feel in our body, what's happening in our lives. You mentioned pregnancy and motherhood, and
How are you feeling about that?
I mean, I will share. I mean, body image, I feel like if you're a woman in this society is, most likely something that you've dealt with or struggled with at some point. So definitely can relate to much of what you've said. And, I feel like I've had my own hurdles and my own, healing journey around the body, but being pregnant is a totally different journey, and I'll share like, somebody said just such a benign comment like, oh, you're getting bigger and I can see like, your face filling out. And I just hysterically
Oh, sweetie.
burst into tears, you know.
Totally.
And I feel like it was such a lesson for me of just, what a sensitive area it can be. And some moments in time can feel much more sensitive.
100%. That makes total sense to me. Also, it's so hard because for women, it's like, they're like, you're getting bigger and you're like, and as you're pregnant. And so it's like, that's the goal in truth. But we have this like, bigger is bad, like direct line in our brain that we've been programmed to believe that anything bigger is bad. And so when we hear that, it's like, I'm doing something wrong. I am bad. I look bad. This is bad. And it's so hard to get out of that mentality of always thinking that smaller is better. Like you look small, you look thin. It's like we it is so deeply ingrained in us, that belief. It's really hard to think otherwise.
It absolutely is. And, as you're sharing, it's like I'm recognizing the parallel too between the body and the voice because there is that conditioning of like, girls should be, good and don't be too loud and things like this. And it absolutely correlates with the body as well.
100%. Yeah, it's huge. It's like if we the voice, for the women in the voice, it's like be nice, be kind, be sweet, be accommodating, be all of these things. And that's also like be small, don't speak out of turn, um, you know, all of these things, be accommodating. And then with the body, it's like be small, don't be too big, don't be too this way, don't be too that way. And it's just ways to keep us small and ways to keep us in a box and ways to just keep us from being in our fullest expression. And if you were to be someone that's like, I'm going to be fully expressed in my voice, I'm going to take up space, I'm going to be super big. And then you're also like, but my body has to be super small. My body has to get smaller and smaller, but my voice and energy is going to get bigger and bigger. There's such a paradox for the way that we want to live, where if we want to be fully expressed and we want to be using our voice and just saying how we feel and living in this like vital, vivacious way of being, we have to let our bodies do that way too. And it doesn't mean we have to be bigger or we have to look a certain way, but it's like allowing our bodies to be in the fullness of their experience in addition to our souls is just so important. And I feel like so many women stifle not only their voices, but their pleasure, their creative expression, their sexuality, their like body sensations. Like we are just stifling and stuffing ourselves so much. And it can be something that becomes depressive, causes us anxiety, makes us feel unfulfilled, and was my experience for a really long time.
It's so interesting because I feel like what you're sharing is just a complete reclamation, a
Mhm.
complete like almost rewilding of going back to primal nature and also putting our pleasure first in all aspects and areas. Valuing self-expression over self-censoring or, people pleasing or anything like this.
Yeah, it's huge. I mean, the people pleasing thing is something that we almost all do. From a young age, we've been conditioned to people please to get connection for safety. It was how we were loved. If we did something our parents liked, we received love, we received notoriety, we received validation. And so for so many of us, that's such an unconscious driver to people please. And I'm someone that's people pleased a lot in my life in really subtle ways. And really, I've found that the less I've people pleased and the more I've just pleased myself, the better my life has become. And it seems really backwards and it seems kind of selfish to think about that. But it really is like the first service to ourselves and filling of ourselves and focus on ourselves where we can really become the whole person that we need to be to exist in the world as the person that we want to be, the creative soul, the embodied woman, the amazing lover, and the amazing friend. But we all really need to have that reclamation moment of our pleasure, of our sexuality, of our body, of our voice too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it has this ripple effect. When you're speaking, it's like such the journey of self love, of putting yourself first, of doing the inner work. And I actually love so much that you talk about therapy and you talk about, different healing modalities because I feel like that's so important. And you can feel that, you can feel when somebody's done a lot of inner work, and it has an impact on every single relationship that we have.
Yes, it's so huge. I totally know. So what I would say about the feeling and experience of being around someone that's done a lot of work in therapy, being someone that's been in this space for a long time and has interacted with a lot of people that have done a lot of work, is that there's this feeling of a spaciousness for all of themselves. There is a internal acceptance of every experience. There is a internal center. Like most people that have done a lot of work, you feel like they have a center. You feel like they know who they are and that if things get hard, they're still going to have themselves and they're still going to have their own back. And what I've realized is that over time, the more I've been able to love the parts of me that I once thought were unlovable, the more I've been able to accept and love all parts of me, the more I've been able to um, just be with and be present with every experience that I'm having and be okay with it, the more grounded and centered I've been, and the more I'm able to trust myself, and the more other people are able to trust me. Because before, when I would self abandon, when I wasn't doing something that was like perfect or right, or if someone said something bad about me, and I'd be like, oh my God, maybe they're right. They do have a good point. Like I think that's yeah, I actually think that that's true, and I would kind of just go along with what everyone said. I would believe what everyone said about me. And I would also just believe my own negative voice, believe my own inner critic. But once I was able to really accept and love the messiness, accept and love the imperfections, accept and love the stickiness, then I'm able to have a center of that place that is the person or is the part of me that's loving it all, that internal consciousness. So it's been a process and a journey, but I think the one tool that's been helpful for anyone listening has been internal family systems, has been parts work. And internal family systems is a psychotherapy technique that I'm informed in. And basically, it's the concept of having multiple parts and having multiple experiences happen at once. So, as an example, with the body journey, you can have this experience of believing that your body is never good enough, that you're never thin enough, that will never be the goal weight. And then you can also have this experience of feeling super motivated of you're like, okay, today's the day. I'm going to start the diet. I'm going to do the things. I'm going to get 10,000 steps. I'm going to do all these things. And that's both you, but it's two parts of you. There's a part of you that's like, okay, we're going to do this. We're going to be motivated. We're going to lose weight. And then there's the part of you that's like, it's never going to work. I'm never going to be enough, all of these things. So by being aware of and being present to multiple experiences and multiple parts, and loving it, you can really, really get to know yourself in a really deep way. And then you can have this more integrated sense of self because you've been aware of and conscious to multiple experiences and loved those parts, even if it's uncomfortable.
Mm. I am not super familiar with
Oh,
internal
yeah.
family systems, but I've heard you share about it. And I'm guessing, that there's a part that
Mhm.
perhaps gets, encouraged or that we maybe like lead with in certain situations.
Yes.
So hearing you share about like loving all the parts, embracing all parts of us, and understanding in awareness of how and why those parts and aspects come out, I feel like would be so helpful and healing.
I think that's so intuitive that you just said that. And I've thought about that before, but I think I haven't thought about it enough that we do have parts that we lead with. Like, in astrology, there's the sun, the moon, and the rising sign. And oftentimes, the rising sign is the sign that you present to the world with. So, the sun sign is like your core of who you are. That's like your being, but your rising sign is how you present to the world. So, as an example, I'm a Virgo rising, and Virgos are very much attention to detail. Virgos are very much anal. Virgos are very much perfectionists. And that's how I present to a lot of people. It's like, okay, I have all my ducks in a row. I'm, making sure to take care of everything. I'm making sure to look a certain way and be a certain way. And that's what I've sort of accustomed myself to do, where I'm like, I get valued and I get validated by being perfect, by having all the answers, by being, having all my ducks in a row, blah, blah, blah. So there is definitely a part of us that gets presented to people. And that's kind of like the masks from like a Jungian psychology perspective. We all have our masks that we wear to the world, which is fine. It's not a bad thing to wear masks, but that can oftentimes get over indexed. And we can just become that mask so much, that's the ego self, that we never let our true selves be seen.
I love that you just compared that to the rising sign, since the rising sign is really what we present the world,
Yes. What's your rising sign?
Virgo. Also, I'm
Virgo sister.
yeah.
Krista.
We have similar because I'm a Virgo sun, Virgo rising, and then Pisces moon.
That's a good one. I love Virgos. I
Same.
love Virgos.
Yeah, yeah. And I think, what you're sharing about too with the masks, it's like this journey of taking off the masks as well, and being really comfortable because even in really close relationships, really close friendships, there might be parts of us that we're super comfortable expressing, but when it comes to maybe expressing a boundary that was overstepped or something that hurt your feelings, like that can be super vulnerable. So I,
100%. It's
yeah,
challenging.
mhm.
I think too, just sorry to interrupt you, but just it's so important. And I'm so glad you said that because people can think that intimacy is basically sharing things that they've gone through and sharing traumatic experiences in gossip, in having the same opinions and perspectives. But real intimacy is built through conflict resolution and conflict repair. It's when you are going to someone you love and telling them something like, hey, I love you, but when you said this, it really hurt my feelings. And that doesn't really work for me in dynamics. Or, hey, I love you, but if we're going to be in relationship, I'm not going to be able to be with someone that does this. Or, hey, I actually want to see other people. Or, hey, I want to do, it's like the truth of who you are being revealed is and being accepted and worked through and discovered is actual true intimacy. So I think it's really important that people understand that because I think a lot of us think that intimacy is something that it's not.
So true. How have you seen relationships in your life transform as you've gotten more honest and been able to share from the heart?
Oh, that's such a great question. Um, and I'm pausing because, what I will say is that it's provided a really beautiful deepening and greater intimacy and love in some of my relationships. And it's also ended some of my relationships. Some people cannot withstand honesty. And if you want to have honest, deep, meaningful relationships, you have to be able to withstand honesty. And I'm not saying honesty like, yo, girl, that's not like, I don't like your shirt, or like, yo, you shouldn't be talking to him, or you should break up with him. Like, that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about the honesty that exists within a dynamic where you're talking about that person, you're talking about that dynamic, you're sharing something that like has a risk involved. Brene Brown talks about vulnerability a lot, and she's like, actually, in vulnerability, it's when there's a risk involved to the relationship. So you're sharing something that essentially could end, adjust, or change that actual relationship. You're not talking about other people, you're not talking about other situations, you're talking about that connection or that dynamic. So I've had a really beautiful deepening with most of my friendships. It's allowed us to express things that are sticky and hard. Like an example was, I have one of my best friends planning my birthday coming up soon. And I texted her yesterday and was like, hey, where are the invites? And she kind of was like, messaging about it. And I was like, hey, I just need to tell you that right now there's a part of me that feels forgotten. I feel like you haven't really prioritized this. And, she called me right away. And I was like, yeah, it's totally fine, but this is how I feel right now. And we're able to clear it right away. It's like it's happening with my truth, it's happening in that moment, it's happening really quickly. And I'm being honest with myself and saying, like, I love this person. They deserve my honesty, they deserve my true feelings. And I feel forgotten in this moment. And she was able to be like, hey, girl, I hear you. That makes total sense. I'm going to fix this and we're all good. And then in some relationships, as an example, on the other end, I've tried to express honestly how I feel about something, like, hey, I just want to tell you in this moment, I felt uncomfortable. And for some people who haven't really done a lot of shadow work or work to love all parts of them, that can really be hard to hear. They can be like, well, I was trying to do this thing. I didn't mean to do that, da 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 da. It's like they're scared to accept that as truth because that would mean they're bad, or that would mean they're inconsiderate, or that would mean they're not good. But in that situation, you're just trying to express something and be heard and seen. And it doesn't mean that they're bad or anything like that. So it has, definitely ended or transformed relationships too. So it's not all roses. And it's some of the hardest work of our lives, but it's something that I'm really committed to do.
It's so beautiful. And I feel like when we show up differently in relationships, there's an invitation to respond in a different way. And of course, like I feel like conscious, communication is something that you practice over time. And you've shared about security statements. Can you share a little bit about what those are?
My favorite thing. I'm so glad you said that. So, security statements are something that I've learned from Lindsay, who's my best friend and co host. So, I remember when I was in my relationship. So, I was in a long term relationship for around 10 years. And I remember having hard conversations with my partner, and I would be talking to my best friend Lindsay and be like, okay, this is what I want to say to my partner. I want to say, this isn't working for me. This is really bothering me that you're doing this. And I don't really like this and all of these things. And I'd kind of go on of this rant of what was wrong, what was bothering me, what annoyed me, what they had to change. And I remember Lindsay having this really beautiful reframe of saying, how about you say, I love you so much. You're my best friend. And you're usually really good at showing up for me in this way. And so I was really disappointed because I felt like that was missing this time.
Mm-hmm.
So in that, she's validating the relationship, validating the love. She's also bringing it back to this situation and not like you always, never, those like really like hard statements,
Triggering. Yeah.
triggering statements, and making it a lot softer. And also speaking into that person, like, you usually are really good at this, but this time you kind of dropped the ball. Someone is going to open up and respond completely differently when you are being loving and kind and like speaking into them than when you're like mean and degrading and like blaming and shaming. And security statements and using them in my friendships, at work, and in my romantic relationships to validate the relationship and how much meaningful it is to me, have changed my life.
Such a big game changer. It's something that I'm working on personally because, in the moment when,
I know, honestly, when you're mad to be like, "Ah, I love you," but, it's
all the
so
beautiful
hard.
thing, I know, but it is like the response and be able to be present and to listen and to receive what's being shared is completely transformed through that sharing.
Yes. It's oftentimes like, so it's like, and again, communication is never always perfect. This is the thing is like, I think we always want to try and get it right. We want to be perfect, but it's like security statements can be something where it's like, okay, you've had a moment, you've had a breath, you notice that you're getting annoyed about something, something's really triggering you or bothering you. You're going to process it yourself. You're going to kind of let the steam roll off. You're going to calm yourself a little bit. And then you're going to be like, hey, I love you so much, but it's really bothering me that you put the dishes in the sink again. Usually you're good about this. Could we be really mindful about, you know what I mean? Like allowing yourself to like calm down, metabolize, and then try the security statements work. Because if you're going to try it when you're mad and when you're triggered, it's going to seem like fake. It's not even going to really work. And so it's like the goal thing, but it's not always perfect.
Mm. What do you look for now in female friendships?
Hmm. My gosh, I think the first thing, and this is crystallized for me recently, is self-awareness. Self-awareness is so key. I think even in any relationship that I'm in, like no one has to be perfect, no one has to be the best person ever, but we need to be self-aware of what sort of shortcomings we have, what we're working with, what we're really good at, where we shine, where we thrive. And so self-awareness isn't just like knowing that, like, hey, I'm someone that's codependent and I have a boundary issue. So if you notice me needing you a little bit too much, just say something. If you notice me kind of being wonky with my boundaries, just say something. It's also like, I'm an amazing listener. Like, I will be holding it down for you listening wise. And if you need any advice, I got you. And so being able to know the value add that you bring to a relationship and friendship is really, really key too, because then you know how to serve, then you know how to love, then you know how to be with people in both ways. What I also look for is the ability to be really, really deep and then also really, really light. Like, I like to go super deep with stuff, talk about like all the things. And then also, I like to have a lot of fun and laugh a lot and just be goofy, because if you don't have that ability to like go up and have fun and be silly, it's really hard. Like, life is really long and life can be really challenging. And so, I really need my like crew to be able to have fun just as much as we are able to go deep.
Yeah. Another question that I wanted to ask you about relationships, so many people stay in relationships that are not alive, they're not aligned. And I feel like it takes a lot of courage to, say, this is transforming. And, what advice would you have for somebody that's navigating that type of experience?
Hmm. Yeah, so changing relationships and staying in them too long. So what I'll say is that, I was in a long-term relationship for around 10 years. And I think, there was probably a part of me that was like, I think we could have ended before. But I also really just now look back and I have to really give myself credit that I moved when I knew I needed to, and I moved when I knew that I was ready. So I think just reminding people that like your soul knows what it's doing, and there are spiritual contracts that you're a part of, that your soul needs to go through. And so you might be a part of a spiritual contract that needs to end or transform at a certain time, and your soul's going to know when to move. But what I'll also say is that when we are not listening to our intuition or our gut, and we are not getting out of the relationship or the situation or the thing, oftentimes something will happen to move us out of that. For me, just as an example, when I was younger in relationships, when I was way, way, way back, when I wasn't getting out of relationships in time, they were cheating on me or I was cheating on them, or we were just kind of being funky town USA because we weren't saying our truth and we weren't moving on. In friendships, it can be something happening where both of you are like moving out of each other's lives in some way. And so I think being really in touch with your intuition as a guide for when you feel good in relationships and when you feel like things are changing and transforming, and knowing that that's okay. I think I had to be okay with that, because I remember when I first moved to Los Angeles feeling shame because I wasn't someone that had the same friends that I had when I was 4. Like I have a best friend from home that I've been friends with my whole life, but I'm someone that's had new friends every couple years. Like I really, really have evolved with my friendships. And I was like, I think there might be something wrong with me. Like, what's wrong with me? But I've just accepted that that's part of my path and that's part of my process. And when you can really accept yourself for who you are and then accept the people that come in and out of your life during that time and trust that they're meant to be there for a reason or for a season, then life can get really beautiful. And as a last thing, what I also do as a practice is I release any attachments to my friendships regularly. So, what I realized is that with a lot of my friendships, I was so attached to them. I was like, without this friend, I am nothing. Without this relationship, I'm going to lose everything. They mean so much to me. And so now I have a practice of if any relationship in my life ended, I would still be okay. I would still love myself. I would not abandon myself. I would be fine. And that doesn't mean I'm not deeply in love with the people in my life, but it means that I don't need them and I don't have an attachment to them. It means I want them in my life. So, really recalibrating to not need people, but want people can also really help you navigate transitions and relationship seasons or romantic seasons of your life.
Mm. Yeah, that's such beautiful advice. How has this new chapter unfolded for you? And, how are you relating to different aspects of yourself in a new light?
Mm. I'm so lucky that I get to do this and have this reflection time. It's like just so powerful for me. So thank you. Um, so the new season of my life, for anyone that's listening and doesn't know, I'm post breakup. I was married, so it's post divorce. It's been about a year now, and then I've gone through some changes within my friendship groups. I've have my dad who's pretty sick, so I'm kind of navigating that grief period too. And I think having a big season of grief and transition and change, but then also on the other end, really finding that the pain has really shown me who I am. And the pain has really helped me cultivate a deeper sense of self, and a deeper sense of self love has been really beautiful. Life is about contrast in a lot of ways. So when we go to the depths of who we are and the pain and the struggle of ending a really long term relationship or seeing someone you love dying, it's like in those moments, you can also be reminded of what is of value in your life, what's important, how strong you are, what matters. And then you can move on and move forward with your life with a deeper sense of clarity on what you want to do and who you want to be because you've really gone to the depths. So I'm stepping into this new season of my life with just a deeper sense of self-love and gratitude and joy that I didn't have access to before, and a clearer sense of purpose than I think I've ever had, because I think before in the work that I do with the podcast and everything, I did it for myself in a lot of ways. I wanted to heal, I wanted to learn, I wanted to express myself. And now I feel like I've gotten to the point where I have so much love and gratitude and a deep sense of self peace that I can now serve. And I think if I would have said I was serving before, it would have been for myself. And now I'm actually like, oh, I'm resourced enough and I am in enough self love to actually serve the world. So I'm just feeling ready to serve.
That resonates so deeply with
I'm the
me and
same
my
way.
own personal experience. Any big breakup, or health challenge or something like this, I feel like it's brought me so much deeper within myself, and it's touched that core aspect of tenderness and your heart open, in such a vulnerable and powerful and profound way.
Yeah, it's huge. We avoid suffering so much. We avoid hard times so much, and it makes so much sense. The human experience has so much pain and suffering throughout it. It sometimes can take you down. But
Mm.
what I've recognized is that in the pain and suffering, it's been the most powerful transformation for me. It showed me who I am. Like I have become so much better through every suffering and painful moment. It's like almost addicting now, where I'm like, okay, what is this going to show me about myself? How is this going to change my life in a good way? How is this going to clarify my values? How is this going to allow change to be experienced so that I can be more of myself rather than less?
Mm. Yeah, it reminds me of that Eckhart Tolle quote that's like, how do I know this is the experience that I'm meant to have? It's because it's the experience that I'm having. And it's this idea that every situation, every experience is for us in some way if we approach it from that perspective. And something I caught of your sharing recently. I know that you're a student and teacher of the Law of One, and I believe, if I'm not mistaken, you were sharing something about how the liberation and the journey of liberation here on Earth, and how it's so multi-layered and so multifaceted. And it's just, I love how you are tying that in with discovering yourself and then being so present and able to live in full embodiment of your purpose and service to others.
Love a Law of One drop. I haven't talked about this in a bit, but for anyone listening, the Law of One is a channeled text. There's 5 books within it, and it was basically a channeling done in 1988 in Kentucky of this being called Ra, which is a 6 dimensional entity that brings through messages about oneness and unity and forgiveness and basically why we're here on earth. And it's one of my favorite texts of all time. It's one of those reads that I just felt like I was reading something that felt like a soul resonance for me. And one of the things that I really got from that book was a lot of what you said, which is really approaching life like this beautiful mythic drama. Just like, oh my God, from a soul perspective, my soul is chosen to be here on earth, to be in earth school. And my soul has these lessons that it's here to learn. And so whenever I come up against a new lesson, whether it's codependency or whether it's heartbreak or whether it's grief, it's like, oh my God, this is what my soul came here to do. This is like on my school curriculum. How could this be fun? How could this be interesting? How could this be something that I'm really seeing from the outside perspective instead of getting so caught up in the human and the pain of it and the journey? And so, really seeing things from a higher perspective of knowing that this is all a part of the plan, this is all a part of the journey. And that from a Law of One perspective, one of the teachings is really about pain and joy or grief and happiness are all the same from a soul perspective because the soul doesn't care about the feelings, it cares about the experience that it's having. And so, whether it's sadness or joy, it's just here for the experience. It's not here to judge what it is because our mind is what's saying sadness is bad, happiness is good, grief is bad, joy is good. And that actually, from a soul perspective, who just wants experience and wants to feel everything on earth, isn't always true. So when I can look at that higher perspective, it's such a beautiful thing. But just for anyone that's listening to, though, I definitely have my days where I'm not like, oh yes, my soul is enjoying this, me crying on the bathroom floor about blah blah blah. It's like I'll definitely have my human moments, but when I can, I'll try and stay in like the joy and pleasure of life's journey. But it doesn't mean I don't get in my human very often.
What would you say from a soul perspective are kind of one of your or some of your directives in this lifetime that you were meant to focus on, deepen into, share?
I'm obsessed with this question. Mm. So one of my soul directives in this life is I'm someone that's so focused on other that I can lose myself. And I define who I am based on who I'm in relationship to. And that's codependency in a lot of ways. But I've been someone that I think from the outside, people would think I'm myself, I'm confident, I'm these things. But I really deeply determine who I am, how I feel, what I'm saying, how I'm feeling in relationship to other people. So I oftentimes have to work on being alone, work on figuring out who I am, work on prioritizing my own needs over other people's. I'm someone that has to worry about prioritizing my voice over other people's and really just coming back to my center, coming back to myself because as a Pisces, with a Pisces moon, like I'm just very watery, I'm very nebulous. I can get very caught up in the current. I can kind of lose myself in situations. I'm an empath as well. So it's like all of that just kind of prioritization of everyone else before me. So I think that's a huge one. I think the voice is huge. A directive for me to lean in and use my voice as a method and mode of change and a method and mode of expression. And then I would also say connection. So I prioritize a lot of things over like I will do anything for connection, and that's a lot of the codependency and what I talked about before. But I'm someone that feels like I always need to feel connected to people. So I have a job where I'm always connected to people, which is kind of like the good thing and the bad thing. But I need to find that I should connect to myself first, and that I should be prioritizing my own connection to myself or God. So I think those are some of the things. But honestly, it probably would change every 7 years in my life with those directives, but those feel like my truth right now.
Oh, those are so good. Those are so good. I am curious to ask you about your journey in business and specifically growing a spiritual business. I know spirituality is infused into your show, your teachings, and also at the same time, like really, growing a business and remaining true to your authentic path and what feels aligned. Like, how has that been navigating?
Yeah, that's huge. For me, I never thought that I didn't think spirituality and business mixed. When I first got into the game in 2015, 2016, I always felt like, to be a spiritual person was one thing and to have a business was another. And in the corporate world, I felt like I had to be this inauthentic self the whole time. So I was programmed with the belief that I had to be out of my authenticity to make money. I had to be out of my authenticity to be successful. And being myself meant that I wouldn't ever make money or, experience a life that I love. So I'm so grateful for Almost 30 for reprogramming that for me and really teaching me that I could be myself as a spiritual being and make money. What I see of it now is that the more myself I am and the more clear on my gifts and what I have to offer the world and my own unique essence, the more money I make and the more successful my businesses are. And so this means that we have to be in deep relationship with the cultivation of our unique gifts, with the understanding of ourselves, with looking at our shadows, with looking at our shortcomings, with looking at our limiting beliefs, and then working with those so that we can go confidently into the world and monetize our gifts or monetize our skills or monetize what we're here to do. And so it's a really beautiful thing because I get to be myself and make money